Usually before I start an anime, I skim over reviews so I can see if it's worth the watch or not without spoiling myself. And when I start the new anime, I give it maybe 3 episodes before I make any judgments. And I was going to be especially careful with bottom tier character Tomozaki, because in one of the reviews I skimmed through, it said that even though the first episode was cringy, it got better later on. Spoiler alert, it didn't get much better. Sup YouTube, Echo here, and today I'll be telling you why I think bottom tier Tomozaki was kind of a train wreck. Disclaimer, this is my personal opinion, you don't have to agree with me. Also, this review will contain spoilers. The review I skimmed through did get something right. The first episode was cringy. The thing is, the cringe is continuous. I honestly was tempted to drop this anime, and I probably should have, but I wanted so badly to believe that it would get better. Okay, that's enough of my rambling. Let me actually get into why I'm not a huge fan of this anime. First off, let's talk about the characters. So we have our main character, Fumiya Tomozaki, who starts off with 0 social skills. He has the social skills and motivation of a rock. This man has never held a normal conversation, and overall has no interests outside of gaming. Specifically, a game called TACFAM, which is like a knockoff Smash Bros. And what is this loner's secret? He's actually the top player in all of Japan. But despite this, he's a gloomy, friendless loser in real life. At first I thought he might have been bullied at school, because the anime starts off with him playing against this rude boy that turns out to be the most popular and perfect guy in school. But no, he's not being bullied, he just doesn't talk to anyone. He has a very pessimistic view on life, and makes constant comparisons between real life and video games. While he believes TACFAM is a god tier game, he believes real life is absolute shit tier. He thinks that all popular cool kids were born high tier characters, while he was born a low tier character, so he might as well not try. Right off the bat, I can't help but say I honestly don't hold any sympathy for him. I get it, he's an introvert, I'm one too. So when Aoi Hinami, the likely female lead to this romance, comes in telling him straight up that he's a loser, I see it as a much needed wake-up call for him. Yes, the way she came across was rude, but Tomozaki admits that she's telling the truth. I see Tomozaki as a self-insert character for the likely average otaku male viewer. He doesn't have any friends, isn't very good at socializing, isn't super handsome, and spends most of his time playing video games. That being said, I'm glad he at least has a personality, unlike some self-insert characters I've had to bear witness to. I'm not a guy, but I can relate to him to a certain extent. I as well have trouble socializing and spend far too much time on otaku-like activities, watching anime. But his lack of will to improve pisses me off. I'm depressed, I know what it's like to lack motivation, but the thing is, he doesn't even lack the motivation, he lacks a goal to work towards, because he gave up before he could even start, blaming everything on society.
Say peacock and no one bats an eye. Say poopcock and society goes wild. Society!
This man was a few steps away from becoming a living edgelord. We live in a society meme. So I appreciate Hanami's intervention with him, and agree with most of the points that she made. I don't have a problem with the premise itself. Of course, I knew that he was going to experience character development, but I saw a number of guys saying that he's the same as me without realizing that the author was likely saying, if this is you, try to aim to better yourself. Which isn't a bad thing. In fact, I'd probably really enjoy it if this anime was just about self-improvement. I repeat, if this anime was just an anime about self-improvement. But, of course, there's the romance tag. And while I don't have a problem with romance, the way it was written here bugs the shit out of me, which I'll get into later once I'm done talking about the main characters. Now let me move on to Hanami Aoi, the obvious female lead who is pretty, popular, and perfect. And while she may have the character flaw of being two-faced, she's unrealistically perfect. As someone who's had to attend high school, I can confirm that no one has time to do their makeup, be in the top of their class, be the best on their track and baseball team, and be student council president. But she has a similar secret to Tomozaki. She's good at the game TACFAM, and is second ranked in Japan. That's right, yet another thing to add to her impossibly perfect resume. Just because the author added a flaw to an unrealistically perfect character doesn't mean she's all of a sudden believable. One day, after battling him online and losing, she decides to ask him if they could meet up, and he agrees, and lo and behold, their meeting is somewhat of a disaster. They both recognize each other from school. Hanami's surprised that the quiet loser in front of her was the #1 ranked TAC-FAM player in Japan, and Tomozaki is surprised that the perfect girl from his class was the 2nd ranked. In this meetup scene, Hanami is extremely rude, yet truthful in what she says to Tomozaki, and Tomozaki stands firm with his "we live in a society" belief, until Hanami says that life is a god-tier game, and then all of a sudden he understands because remember guys, he's a gamer. I don't think you understand. He's a gamer. He only understands things through gaming references. Why? Because he's a gamer.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm
a gamer. A gamer.
I don't fit in, and I don't want to fit in. Have you ever seen me without this stupid
controller?
That's weird.
After this, Hanami basically becomes his life improvement coach. She teaches him to treat socializing as a game so he can improve upon it. He has specific goals to clear and does his best to clear them. For this next part, I'm going to put a trigger warning for sexual harassment mention, so if that makes you uncomfortable, skip to this timestamp. Most of what I've explained is from the first episode. Honestly, it had some potential despite its cringe, but then episode 2 came around. More characters were introduced, and I liked them. Being the romance anime with a male main character it is, of course most of these characters are cute girls, but I liked them. I was also pretty happy about the lack of fan service so far. I was happy that the female characters were acting like fairly typical teenage girls. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. The blue-haired girl, Nanami Minami, whom I was coming to like, sexually harasses her friends, and it's passed off as a joke. I'm aware that this is all too common in anime, but that doesn't mean it's okay. It really threw me off, and frankly I was disgusted. As a girl, I've never joked around with my friends like that, and I've never seen any other girls joke around like that either. And as a bisexual girl, it was plain for me to see that this part was only added in to please the male gaze, and I felt uncomfortable with how it seemed to fetishize WLW. The main character Minami may be WLW, I honestly don't know, but that does not mean she has to sexually harass her female peers for viewers to draw that conclusion. It also adds to a stereotype I often see in anime where members of the LGBTQ community are portrayed as predatory, which annoys the heck out of me to no end. This stereotype is harmful to the community, and I wish anime would stop using it. The scene itself didn't add anything to the story, and without it, the anime would have survived. And this is not the only instance of sexual harassment. Not too much later, Hanami is talking to Tomozaki about his posture and touches his butt to help fix his posture. This makes him very uncomfortable, and when she notices this, instead of apologizing, she basically says that he's overreacting and proceeds to do it again later on in the show. In both of these cases, the sexual harassment is just brushed off without any sincerity, when these scenes could have been avoided or at the very least fixed so that they weren't so uncomfortable. How might they be fixed, you may ask? Well, that's easy to answer. CONSENT. Consent. If Minami had asked if she could nibble Hanami's ear and Hanami said it was okay, we could have avoided sexual harassment. And Hanami could have asked Tomozaki before she touched his butt, and he could have said that it's okay, and there, problem solved. You still get the characters interacting in the same way, but you added in consent so sexual harassment is avoided. It really isn't that hard to write in consent. The character of Minami is actually pretty interesting, and the whole sexual harassment addition to her really distracts from her development. In fact, we get a mini character arc for her that lets us get to know her better, and then the anime literally says that her sexual harassment towards her friend increased threefold. And speaking of her friend, Hanabi, oh boy, let me get into her. We get a little backstory how she was very quiet and shy before Minami approached her to be her friend by poking her on the cheek. She continues to annoy Hanabi by poking her on the cheek while Hanabi tells her to stop. Granted, poking someone's cheek isn't that bad, but we all know it eventually elevated to her becoming used to sexually harassing Hanabi. And Hanabi is super passive about it, and it's shocked it to be their thing. This part infuriated me. Not only is the creator aware that they're putting sexual harassment into their creation, they try to make it a wholesome way for two friends to interact with each other, because nothing says friendship like sexual harassment. Am I right? That was sarcasm. Other than being Minami's victim, Hanabi doesn't really have much of a personality. And speaking of bland characters, let me tell y'all about Izumi Yuzu. She's your average female character that has no goals outside of getting a guy to like her back. She asks Izumi to teach her how to play TAC-FAN better, but only so that she can get closer with Mr. Popular Shuji Nakamura. Other than that, she's kind of just used for fan service. Mr. Popular is kind of seen as an enemy to our loser MC until episode 4, where Tomozaki gives one of the cringiest speeches I've heard in anime, defending Shuji from a popular girl that is mostly used as a lazy plot device. I appreciate that the author gave Shuji some development and not making Tomozaki enemies with all of his male classmates, though. In fact, Tomozaki becomes pretty close to Mizusawa Takehiro, his classmate and one of Shuji's friends. Mizusawa is pretty sociable, and it's later revealed that he tends to not be very sincere about his actions when he decides to change after being influenced by Tomozaki's sincerity. And then, out of nowhere, in a later episode, he confesses to our perfect female lead, Hanami. This took me by surprise because it didn't seem like they had much chemistry. Heck, Tomozaki and Mizusawa seem to have more chemistry.
お前何事も真剣だよな。え？さっきのコントローラーとか今もそうだけどやるときは超本気っつうか。それはそうか？あとさ、選挙のミミミの演説。あれもお前一枚噛んでたよな。バレてた。けどお前なんでそこまでするわけ？昔からゲームでは負けたくなかったっていうか。ゲーム？演説が？
Last but not least, I'm gonna talk about Best Girl Kikuchi Fukawa, aka Shy Doki Doki Literature Club that is used by Tomozaki and Hanami in order to improve his social skills. She connects with Tomozaki over reading, and since Hanami thinks Kikuchi is interested in him, she advises Tomozaki to use her to gain social skills and then ask her out. Tomozaki points out that feels really insincere, and I agree with him. Tomozaki doesn't have feelings for Kikuchi, or at least is unsure about it, and I'm glad the author made him decide to not ask Kikuchi out, but I'll get more to that later when I address the plot. Overall, the characters didn't feel very relatable or deep to me. Yes, they were further developed as the episodes went on, but I feel like there's two ways you can go with this kind of anime. One is to have characters that are all somewhat over the top, and the other is to have them all be fairly down to earth. Bottom tier character Tomozaki tries to do both at the same time, and while sometimes that works, it wasn't able to balance it at all. We are given a few over the top characters, and instead of treating them as such, the author expects the viewers to be able to somewhat connect with these characters by trying and failing to make them down to earth between all of the fan service and hit or miss comedy. Moving on, let me talk about the character design. Our main character design fits his character pretty well, and I like that after his change in appearance he still looked similar and didn't become this overly handsome chick magnet. I also felt that the other characters had fitting designs to their personality as well. The art and animation were pretty good. Nothing special, but it wasn't terrible. The soundtrack fit fairly well, but nothing in particular stood out to me, including the opening and ending. Now, let me get started on the plot. Oh boy. One thing that doesn't make sense to me is our MC, Tomozaki, just having a normal life as the #1 player in a fairly popular game. That means he's one of the best, and the game is pretty popular. And perhaps I don't know much about pro gamers, but I feel like as the top player in all of Japan, he would perhaps have media outlets trying to reach out to him, or sponsors, or a pro gaming team, or something like that. Gaming can get you pretty far these days, but nothing like that is ever mentioned once in this anime, and instead he plays against either online players or his classmates. It would have made more sense for him to just be really good at the game, and perhaps Hinami also being fairly good at the game, and they decide to meet up rather being the two top ranking players. Plenty of gamers meet friends through gaming and eventually meet up in real life. They don't have to be the top 2 ranking in the country. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but that's not the only issue I have with the plot. Hanami's methods of socialization make no sense to me half the time. Sometimes she makes good points, like when she talks about his posture, smiling, and gets him a haircut. But other times she makes no sense to me, specifically the biggest goal she has set for Tomozaki. She wants him to get a girlfriend, so she has him try to socialize with a bunch of girls. As someone who's watched a few harem anime, I could see where this was headed. I was hoping for otherwise, since harem was not in the list of genres, but alas I expected too much from this anime. Tomozaki's first large goal should have been to make friends, of any gender, not to get a girlfriend. I get that this is supposed to be romance, but it just didn't make any sense to me. You can start off being friends with someone and later have that development into a relationship, but our dear Hanami doesn't seem to get that, as she makes this issue even worse by suggesting that these girls will fall in love with him as long as he puts in the effort, and basically objectifies her female classmates as things he can obtain through video game logic. But life is not a video game, and it's not guaranteed a girl will fall in love with you if you put in the effort. That sort of logic can lead to incel-like behavior. I gave her so much, so why doesn't she love me back? Luckily, the author later points out that this logic is flawed, and I'm glad that they did. I was afraid that they were going to continue pretending like video game logic can work for human relationships. Well, the video game logic did work for a little while, because that was the only way Hanami could get Tomozaki to go along with her goals for him, because he's horny for video games. I'll give the show points for letting Tomozaki figure out that that's not how real life works, at least. As for Tomozaki's growth into a more social person, I felt like it was mostly complete by the 5th episode, and the rest of the series began to focus more on the side characters to give them a little more depth. I felt like the growth was a little unrealistic, but that's just nitpicky of me because I can understand how Hanami's goals after that were becoming more and more necessary and strange as the series went on. Except, the only goal that's treated that way by the anime is the one where Tomozaki has to ask out Kikuchi. Fresh tip: just watch Charisma on Command if you want to learn how to socialize. Don't watch this. The overall messages this show sends gives me mixed feelings. One message I do like is that if you don't put in the effort, you'll never be able to achieve anything. Basically what Hanami is yelling about in the 1st episode. Another message I appreciate is that you can't treat real life relationships like a video game if you want deep relationships with those you surround yourself with. A message I didn't like very much was that the show makes it seem like you need a significant other in order to be happy. Tomozaki's final goal is to get a girlfriend, and once he gets one, it's game clear, right? No. You don't need a significant other to be happy. Happiness can come from all sorts of things, ranging from hobbies to spending time with friends and family. I mean, yeah, I know this is a romance, but a genre shouldn't dictate the messages a show gives. So, would I recommend this anime? Not unless you're one of those guys that likes loner self-insert main characters and wants to live vicariously through them. This anime had its good and bad points, so I'd rate it a 5 out of 10. The score would definitely improve if the fan service wasn't added in and the characters had more depth. Thanks for watching! If you'd like to see more anime-related content, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I was originally going to include this in my seasonal review of anime, but I felt compelled to write a more in-depth review. See you next video! Echo out!